welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Marantz-Cohen, and today our guest is the literary critic and public intellectual Camille Paglia. Camille Paglia is University Professor of Humanities and Media Studies at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. She's the author of an acclaimed 1990 study of Western culture, Sexual Personae, Art and Decadence, from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson, and of two collections of essays, Sex, Art, and American Culture, and Vamps and Tramps. She's recently published a new book, Break, Blow, Burn. Actually, it's just out in paperback, which is a close analysis of 43 of her favorite poems. This is the first of a two-part interview with Camille Paglia. In this segment, we'll discuss her ideas about gender, celebrity, politics, and culture. And in part two, we'll concentrate on her new book, Break, Blow, Burn, and on the state of poetry in general. Camille Paglia, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you for inviting me, Paula.
A few weeks back, we interviewed Dana Gioia, who's head of the NEA and also a poet in his own right, and we talked about the public intellectual. And in the process, he named you as the exemplar of that individual. And I wondered whether you feel this is an accurate description of who you are and what that role entails, public intellectual.
Well, I think I do characterize myself as an intellectual. Simone de Beauvoir was an enormous inspiration to me when I was in high school. I read The Second Sex when it came out in paperback in the United States in 1963, I think it was. And I had been searching for role models for some time. I'd found a paperback of Mary McCarthy essays in a secondhand bookstore in Syracuse. And I thought of her as a model of the intellectual, too. There was probably no one else. I mean, aside from Amelia Earhart, I had very few role models when I was young.
Amelia Earhart was a role model.
Was a huge role model for me. I had an obsession with her for like 3 years. And in fact, Newsweek published a letter from me in 1963 and calling for rights for American women and using her as an example of the NASA space program still had no women astronauts yet. And so I think that a public intellectual is someone who attempts to bridge the gap between academe and the general audience. I probably played a pioneering role in this in the early 1990s. When I came on the scene, after my first book was published, there was humanities professors were not writing op-ed pieces for newspapers.
Right.
Economics professors did, poli-sci or history, but not humanities professors. So there was really a kind of backlash against me. There was like a Harvard professor who told the media, serious people do not write for the newspapers. And I thought that was like a shocking thing to say in this age of popular culture.
Well, it's interesting, though, that book, that landmark book, The Sexual Personae, 1990, it came out of your dissertation at Yale. So in that sense, you were an academic, you were a scholar. I imagine that you weren't thinking about this crossover at that time. Did it just happen? I mean, that book really made a splash. In fact, I have here a quote from the Inquirer. It said, Paglia makes more outrageous claims in her first 20 pages than most academics dare in a lifetime.
Yes. Well, it was the work of a lifetime, because I was 43 by the time the book was printed. The book was rejected by 7 publishers and 5 agents. It was a tremendous struggle. Even in pieces, only a small portion of it had ever been published before the book came out. But I had been in a very down period of my career. I had been writing for newspapers. I had written for alternative papers in New Haven, writing on an African American cultural museum, on Pizza Dynasty on Worcester Street in New Haven. All kinds of things.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in journalism and popular culture. In fact, when my love of movies and pop in general, definitely I think cast me under a kind of shadow at Yale Graduate School from 1968 to 72. I think people look askance at it. And my own mentor, Harold Bloom, and to this day is rather disdainful of popular culture. But I feel like Andy Warhol, brought up in an industrial town, Pittsburgh, as I was brought up in an industrial town of Endicott, New York, where my family had emigrated to work in the shoe factories. I always felt that popular culture is like an idiom that I felt absolutely at home with. And therefore, right from the very beginning, when I was in junior high school, I was trying to write papers on images and advertising and things like that were it was really kind of out of the
You were
mainstream.
trying to find your genre in a sense, it sounds like. I mean, you did go on and get a PhD. I mean, that supposedly spoils people for doing anything, writing anything else.
But it's my generation of the 1960s. I think that we just saw pop as a kind of a natural, almost like a life's blood. I mean, it was a little different for the generation before me. We are the ones who said you must take movies seriously, not just art cinema, European art cinema, but the great Technicolor movies of the 1950s, trashy movies, and also gay men had preceded me in this. I have a kind of gay male sensibility in certain ways. I love Joan Crawford movies, Bette Davis movies, you know, the great divas. A kind
and
of
you
taste.
always loved that stuff.
Always,
yeah.
okay. The great divas, like Auntie Mame, was a movie that was practically my Bible throughout my youth, and I never found anyone who liked it, aside from gay men, and we recite lines back and forth to each other. So I don't know what it is, but I've always been an upholder of Hollywood at the same time as I was very grounded in classics.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an archaeologist, so I have the long view of history in my mind, as well as a tremendous love of the evanescent.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about this. Wanting to erode the distinction between high and low culture. And yet that has become popular in academia now. Would you say, though, in a different way from the way in which you value that erosion?
Absolutely.
What's the difference?
I think cultural studies and in media studies, as it's practiced in academia, American academia and British academia, is very punitive. It's based on European models, often Marxist, whether it's the Frankfurt School or the Raymond Williams Cultural Studies School in Britain. And it tends to use big buzzwords like commodification. It sees the poor mass audience as in some way passive to the shaping by manipulation of a conspiratorial faction of capitalists and heterosexists and all kinds of things like that. That is not my view of popular culture. While I don't want to ignore the commercial mission of popular culture or its financial underpinnings, at the same time, I am an appreciator. I'm an enthusiast.
Okay.
And I
celebrate.
I'm a fan. I celebrate.
Yeah.
Okay? And I think that is closer to the gay male sensibility. We tend to be connoisseurs. I'm a connoisseur of art, a connoisseur of Hollywood, and I always say to my classes, if anyone here wants to write a classic feminist attack on fashion magazines, if it's finding them degrading and an oppression to women, absolutely you have free speech in this class. But that is not the way I view fashion magazines. To me, fashion magazines are part of the history of art, part of a lineage of visual images that, and again, it's why the gay male aesthete and I do see things in the same way. It's peculiar, but I think it's part of my Italian-American background. We were raised with visual images. Italian Catholic churches were a treasure house of visual images. So even though I'm a literary scholar and most of my career has been in teaching literature, I'm highly visual, which is why I've also written on film. I wrote a book on Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds for the British Film Institute.
Yes, I know that book. It's
and
a wonderful book.
My next book is going to be a companion book to Break Will Burn. It's going to be visual images.
Okay. This notion, though, of popular culture having value, do you feel? Do you focus on certain aspects of popular culture that you think will have enduring value? And I wonder, inversely, whether you think there are so-called canonical works that you think that you found have been inflated overly by the culture or by certain kinds of academic snobbery. And I wonder if you'd give us some examples of that.
I think that I absolutely believe that every genre in any culture at any time is going to produce a canon, and that it's the critic's obligation to propose a canon and to defend it, but be ready at any time to revise it. I think that we should be in a position now to say to young people, there are certain canonical works that you should know about the history of Hollywood, and they would include Marlene Dietrich and the Blue Angel. They would include Gloria Swanson and Sunset Boulevard, Imitation of Life with Lana Turner. There are certain great performances, Catherine Deneuve and Repulsion, and
the works of Alfred Hitchcock.
Practically all of the works of Alfred Hitchcock. North by Northwest. It is a masterpiece.
A masterpiece and a frothy one.
Yeah, amazing.
I
could watch it hundreds of times. And then in Vertigo, of course, has emerged as something that is just so central to modern imagination. And I think that, in the great debate, whether Citizen Kane or Gone with the Wind is the more classic American movie, I would go with Gone with the Wind, even though Citizen Kane was so influential on technique and helped to promote film noir as a genre. I personally feel that Gone with the Wind, inconveniently convenient because of the racial injustice that is portrayed in a kind of superficial manner there. The performances that will hardly ever be surpassed. And a way,
the sweeping entertainment value.
Value, emotional value, but also the way it shows history and war, and the way it shows personality, the skill with which individual performances have been done here, including Vivien Leigh's ability to do Scarlett O'Hara that passes over time. It's extraordinary, and it's unfortunate that that film is being held back at the present moment because of the cringe-making way that slavery is presented in it.
Huh. Okay. Well, I wonder if to switch gears a little bit, you are famous for your sort of pithy way of encapsulating figures in culture. Your one-liner, your epigrammatic imagination.
Yes.
And you have said, for example, of Jackie Kennedy, I like this one, a survivor of the blood sport of male politics, comparing her stained suit to the shroud of Turin.
Oh dear.
So I thought,
well,
I mean, you probably don't, I don't know if you even remember that one.
Well,
that stood out for me. I wanted to give you a few names and have you exercise your.
Well, wait. Let me just say one thing. I believe that as a writer, okay, I do esteem the sentence. Okay, if people would say to me, what is my my formula for writing? I would say, first I write sentences, then I write paragraphs. Now that may seem very simple, but most people don't write sentences anymore. My attitude is, and I learned this from studying Greek poetry, or the fragments of Greek poetry in college, that if only one sentence of mine would survive, in the way that there is sometimes only one fragment of a poem survives, I want all of my personality and all of my learning to be in one line, okay?
Yeah.
And that's how I do it. So I try to write the sentence as if it's the last thing that I will ever do.
Is that hard to do?
No, because I tend to like the internet. But then I also construct paragraphs in a way that's completely gone. I construct them like blocks of stone, especially in Sexual Personae. You can really, they're like blocks. And in places where they force me to drop things, and I can see that the paragraph is not symmetrical, the one before it really annoys me. I mean, like the last paragraph of the manifesto first chapter of Sexual Personae is kind of gutted because they thought there wouldn't be space for it. And
it gives you, it bothers you.
It gives me like the heebie-jeebies when I see it.
Because the architecture is off.
Yeah,
right?
the architecture is off. It's architectural. Writing is architectural.
I agree with you, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to give you some names just to.
Yeah, sure.
Monica Lewinsky.
well, poor Monica. Poor Monica.
Yeah.
Well, I am a Democrat who voted for Clinton twice. But I think that Monica Lewinsky was horribly exploited, and that the sacred halls of the White House were profaned, and that my fellow Democrats, gave Clinton a pass that they would never have given to a Republican in the same circumstance.
Another example of how you work against the grain often.
I work against the grain. Yeah.
Okay. Angelina Jolie.
Adore Angelina Jolie. She's the last
really?
major star in Hollywood at the moment. She's
ridiculous.
She's the only true personality right now.
Yeah.
She's complex, unpredictable. She maintains her privacy somehow in the midst of the glare. Now, her performance in Gia, okay, as Philadelphia's own Gia Karanji, the model who became addicted to heroin and then died of AIDS, is tremendous. It's one of the great performances of the last 15 years.
I'll have to check it out.
Oh my, it's amazing, an amazing piece of work. She's
Unfortunately, she's diminished in an interview, I think, personally. I see what you mean. The persona is very powerful, but then when you hear her speak, I think it loses something.
Well, you could interview, Madonna does not give a good interview. Madonna comes across as witless in an interview, but
that's not the point then?
No, you can't expect a performer, okay, to be able to be articulate. I mean, the articulateness or giving a good interview is not something that I would look for, okay? In terms of, I'm talking about a presence on screen, a complexity on screen. And Angelina Jolie, who's part Iroquois, by the way, has a kind of smoldering power that we haven't seen in a very long time in our stars. A long time. I mean, it could be because Hollywood's in decline, okay, and our stars are in decline. In the celebrity culture, where it's all about image and what you wear, what designer you're wearing on the red carpet, et cetera, et cetera. Not since Sharon Stone was at her height in Basic Instinct in 1992 have we really had a complex personality in American entertainment. Angelina Jolie is my only hope at the present moment. So please don't take it away from me.
Okay, all right, you keep her. Hillary Clinton.